Hello you amazing people, it is Riley LH here with another video, and we are back with the turbo-ish Miata, and we are doing one of the biggest jobs for installing a turbo, and that's installing a new clutch. So we're going to be pushing anywhere from 200 and 220 horsepower to the wheels. So I don't want my clutch slipping, and I clutch kick a lot, and I really abuse the crap out of my clutch. So I went with the best of best clutches. And I got a stage 4 competition clutch with a lightweight flywheel. This clutch and flywheel combo is going to be absolutely amazing and be able to put down a lot of power. And I can rely that it's going to last for a very long time. So if you want some of Competition Clutch's awesome products, go check out their website, link in the description. And as well, if you just want to check out some of their cool content, go follow their social medias down below. Okay, so now it's actually time to go ahead and drop the transmission so we can get the new clutch and flywheel in. I'm also doing a rear main seal and a oil pan gasket. When you take out the rear main seal, there's also a little ring that goes around it, and that also tends to leak, so it's best to do that whilst we're there. It's not actually the oil pan gasket itself. So all you really need for this is some basic hand tools, a jack stands, sockets, wrenches, and lots of extensions. Ignore that I have exhaust piping everywhere. I'm working on another project as well right now. You're going to need brake clean, and depending on your car, in our case, we have a Miata, so we're going to need some 7W90 gear oil. And that's pretty much everything you need. It's not that hard of an install. Yes, it is very time consuming, and it's a lot of brute forcing, but a lot of people are very scared of doing clutches and stuff, but it's not as hard as what you would think. So I guess let's go ahead and get into it. I already had the car jacked up and on jack stands, and it's not going anywhere, so I feel safe working under the car. So first off, we have to drain the transmission fluid, and before we do that, if you don't already have one of these creepers, just get one. They cost not very much, and we're going to be working on our back a lot for this job. So to save your back, just get a creeper. But now we can hop on it and slide our drain pan under the car. So you're going to start off by removing your whole exhaust system, which I've actually already done because I was building my downpipe. Now we're going to slide under here and locate this one 24mm drain bolt. And there is a fill bolt right here on the transmission, and you want to go and take that off first. But we have no choice about dropping the transmission, so I'm not really worried about that. If it's stripped, we can always go ahead and fix that outside of the car by just drilling and tapping it. So we're going to go ahead and take off this 24mm bolt right there and drain the transmission fluid. Ow! Ow, that hurt. That hurt a lot. Okay, so we got... Okay, so we got the drain plug. We got the drain plug loose after smashing the crap out of ourselves, and let's hope and pray there's not a bunch of metal that's about to come out of here. Honestly, that looks really good. Okay, there's a little bit of metal on the magnet, but that's normal. But the fluid's looking really good, no teeth or anything. So now we just let that drain. And now gear oil smells awful, so just be ready. Okay, so now we can put back in our drain plug with a new crush washer to make sure that seals up properly. So we're just going to put that on, make sure that lines up and we don't cross thread it. That would suck. Okay, so now we're just going to snug this up. There we go. She's pretty tight and not coming off. So now that the transmission fluid is drained, and we already have that plug in, so we know it's not leaking out and that it's torqued enough to spec, we can actually start dropping the whole transmission. So now we're going to pull our speed sensor, which is right here on the side of the transmission. We're simply just going to get a wrench over it. All I have is an adjustable wrench that will actually fit on it. Break it loose. And then we can just turn it by hand out. Now our speed sensor comes out, and we can just put that off to the side. Okay, so now we're going to go over here to the side of the transmission, and there's going to be the sensor with these red wires on it. If you go to the top of the wires, there's going to be the little bullet connectors. You're simply just going to undo those. That's one, and that's two. And now these connections are not polar, so it doesn't matter which way they go in, so you don't have to mark them. And now on the side of the transmission right here, there's two connectors. They have little pins on them. You're simply going to press those and pull them out. So we undo that one, and we undo this connector as well. And again, these aren't polar either, so it doesn't matter which one goes in first. Now we're going to take off our slave cylinder, which is being held on by two 12mm bolts right off here on the side. Okay, so now that both the bolts are off, our slave cylinder will just simply disconnect. Okay, so now we're going to start taking out the transmission bolts, and we're going to start off with the hardest one all the way at the top. Well, the hardest ones at the top, there's a couple of them. So all of these are 17 millimeters. All you're going to need is a pretty big ratchet and a lot of extensions. So we're going to wiggle our ratchet in there and hope we can get this one off. The PPF is the power plant frame, which is the bar that goes from the transmission to the differential. If you don't already have a breaker bar, you need one. It's going to make a bunch of these stiff bolts a lot easier to get off. Now that we have gotten these front 3 bolts out, we're going to go to the back 2. Okay, so now we're at these back 2 bolts, and yeah, my socket doesn't fit on this one because I'm so low, I scraped the crap out of that bolt. So we're going to have to just get a big wrench on this one. Okay, so we can't get it within a big adjustable wrench, it just ends up trying to round it off. So we're going to go and file down these edges. Okay, lots of filing and hammering later, we should be able to get it off. Hopefully. Ah, yes. And now for this last bolt, we're not going to fully take it out, but we are going to loosen it up. And now we got to get out that little washer in there, so we're just simply going to take a flathead screwdriver and our hammer and hammer this out. So before we take the PPF fully off, we need to get the shifter off before we drop that off, because otherwise it's going to pull all this down. So yeah, let's do that real quick. Like I said in my short shifter video, I don't have a center console, so like I said in my short shifter video, I don't have a center console, so literally all I gotta do is unbolt these 4 bolts and take off my shift boot, and I'm done. Now that my shift boot and my trans boot are off, we can drop the transmission out, after we get these last couple bolts out, of course. So now we're gonna disconnect the drive shaft, and all we have to do is come over here to the diff and take off these 4 bolts. They're all 14 millimeters. Okay, so now that we have all the bolts off, we can just simply disconnect the drive shaft. Now we come back up to the front of the transmission, and we slide the whole drive shaft out. Just like that. And now we can take the transmission off the PPF. And that will drop down a little bit on the motor mounts. Okay, so it's officially time to pull the trans. I have 1 bolt loosely in, so we're going to take that out and then try to slide it off. I'm a very lightweight person. I only weigh like 100-something pounds, so this is going to be interesting. I have been in construction my whole life, so I can lift an okay amount and be good. But we still do have the jack supporting the back half of the trans, so we should be good, and hopefully we don't die. Okay, that is the transmission out of my car, and this goes to show if a little 100-pound 15-year-old can drop his trans without a trans jack, so can you. Okay, so now we actually gotta pull this thing out. Well, I think I'm gonna have to jack up the car more to do that. This thing's pretty big. The bow housing isn't gonna clear the oil pan, I don't think. Oh, my poor floor. Oh. Aha, transmission out. Okay, so I think this clutch is actually an aftermarket clutch. I think it's just some eBay clutch, and it would probably hold the power, but it's still a stock flywheel, and I don't know what the life is like on this clutch. And as well, it's going to be absolutely nothing compared to that competition clutch, which is an absolute monster of a clutch with a lightweight flywheel, so it's going to feel way better, and I absolutely know that I'm going to have no issues with it. So let's go ahead and bust this off. And the engine is turning. I forgot about that. But you can see the engine is simply cranking over. So what we're going to do is we're going to grab a bolt, we're going to put it right here, we're going to thread it in, now we're going to take a screwdriver and put it between the flywheel teeth. And now with this, you do want to go in a crisscross pattern, especially if you want to keep the clutch, just to make sure that you're not warping anything. Okay, so now that we have all the bolts off, we can actually take the pressure plate off. Honestly, the flywheel has some heat spots, but it's not bad. And the clutch still has a good amount of life left on it. But we're going to leave that screwdriver in there so we can get our flywheel bolts off. If you can't tell, I struggled with that a good little bit, but we got them all loose, so now we can actually take them out. But now that they're broken loose, we can just simply take all these bolts out and take the flywheel off. Okay, so now that we have all bolts out but one, we're going to go ahead and get ready, because this thing is pretty heavy. It's like 11 pounds, so it's not horrible, but got some weight to it. And now that we have it out, and we smell a lot of oil, you can see our rear main was definitely bad. You can see just piles of oil under here. So now we can replace this rear main seal. Okay, so now it's time to replace the rear main seal, and this rear oil pan gasket is what it's called. So I see everybody go ahead and take out the rear main seal first, but I'm going to try to go and take off the carrier first, which is just these 4 tin mils, and see if that will make my life a little bit easier. So we're going to break these 4 tin mils loose, and now we're going to try to get this off with a screwdriver. Okay, so we're not getting anywhere with that, so we're going to take off the rear main seal first. So we're going to bust it in through there, and simply pop it out. Make sure you're not scoring anything up, because otherwise it's going to leak, and that's not going to be any fun. And it's about that easy to get the rear main seal out. And now we have to get this carrier off. Now that took way too long for me to do, and I would 100% just getting a seal pulling tool would make your life a lot easier, but a lot of frustration later and busted knuckles, we got it off. And you can see that was definitely leaking. You can see all the oil marks on it. And honestly, I was debating just leaving it and calling it. a day, but I'm very glad I didn't. This old gasket is brittle as can be. I didn't even know there was one on there at that point. Again, as I've said a billion times, this is supposed to be rubber. So now we just clean this thing up, get our new seals, and put them on. So now that this is cleaned, and it's time to go and chuck all the gaskets and stuff on it. So we have this gasket right down here, which is much, much, much thicker than the stock one, and what we're going to do is we're going to put a thin layer of RTV in here. Put that on, RTV the sides a little bit, and then we're going to put a thin layer of RTV through here, mostly to hold our gasket on and just to be a little bit safe. And then just to be extra safe, I'm going to RTV right there and right there. If you can't tell, I'm really trying not to have to deal with pulling off my transmission again. It's not that bad, but I just don't want to have to deal with that. I just want to drive the car. And I always fall into a rabbit hole. Well, if I'm already here, I might as well do this. And I feel like I would say, well, I'm already here, I might as well put the S2K transmission in. Wink, wink. So let's go ahead and start RTVing everything on. So we're going to take some of this black RTV, pop it open, and lay a thin bead. Now you're going to line that little front mark up with this mark. And you're going to press that in. Now we're going to do a thin layer of RTV in here just to make sure that, primarily, that it just sticks. Now we're going to install our gasket. Okay, so now that this is all RTV'd up, we can slide it back under the car and do a thin layer of RTV on where this is going to be sealing up on the actual engine itself, and then we can go ahead and install it. Okay, so like I said, we're going to add a very small layer of RTV right here. Now we're going to take our whole carrier, we're going to slowly go in, and we're going to push it back into those pins. Okay, so now we can grab our new rear main seal and slide it on. Now once you get it in, you can give it a few small taps with a hammer. Okay, so now that we have everything prepped under the car, it's time to actually install the clutch and flywheel. So if I haven't already gone over this is the competition clutch, stage 4, 6-puck clutch, with their lightweight flywheel. I went with competition clutch because I know that this is going to be able to put down the power, and with the lightweight flywheel, it's going to rev like crazy. So let's go ahead and start opening it up. Now I have already opened it, and you can see the 6-puck clutch itself. You get some stickers with it. You get both a new pilot bearing and a throw-up bearing. You get your pressure plate, which is extremely nice. And as well, you get the lightweight flywheel. I was dumb and opened up the packaging and didn't fully seal it back up, so I do have a little bit of surface rust on the flywheel and a little bit on the pressure plate, but we're going to knock that all off. And as well, with all this, you get bolts for your pressure plate. But let's go ahead and get this flywheel out, and we'll get the new throw-up bearing in there, and as well, we'll go ahead and brake clean it so we can chuck it in the car. So if we come back over here and grab our clutch alignment tool, you can see our throw-up bearings on it. I mean our pilot bearings on it. Okay, with installing this pilot bearing, what you want to do is find a socket that pretty much fits perfectly. In my case, it's a 24mm. And now we're just going to take a little bit of grease and roll our bearing in it to make the install a little bit easier. Just go ahead and slide that all around. Now we put that in our flywheel. Put our socket on. And we tap this in. So now that's perfectly flush in there, so we can actually chuck this in the car now. Okay, first off we're going to go ahead and clean this all up, make sure it's a good mating surface. Now we're going to take the new flywheel and prop it up. Get it lined up. Now we're going to thread a bolt or two in, just to make sure that this doesn't fall off. Now we get back out our 17mm and we snug these up just enough to get the flywheel to where it should be. Okay, so now that we have those two on, we're going to go ahead and start Loctiting the bolts and torquing them to spec. And then once it comes to these two bolts, we're simply just going to take them out, put Loctite on them, put them back in. Now it's time to torque everything down. We're going to torque this to 75 pound-foot, and we're going to do the same exact thing that we did for getting it off, but just reversed to make sure that the flywheel doesn't spin and the engine doesn't crank over whilst we're trying to torque this. So we're going to put a bolt there, and put a screwdriver through it. Okay, now that that's not going anywhere, we can actually start torquing this down. Now make sure you're doing this in a star pattern, and I personally am going to do this in a sequence, so I'm going to slowly step it up. I'm going to start off at 30 foot-pounds, then 50 foot-pounds, and then 75 foot-pounds. As well, use Loctite on this to make sure that these do not come out, because dropping a bolt out of your flywheel, or all of them, would not be very fun. Okay, so now we're going to pull out these other two bolts, put Loctite on them, and torque them down. Okay, so now we're going to get this flywheel super clean. So we're going to take a Scotch-Brite and try to knock off this rust. Okay, so now that we have that very loose dirt and surface rust off, we're simply just going to spray it with brake clean. And make sure this thing is clean and get all the oil from factory off. But you can see how much dirt is coming out. We want this as clean as humanly possible. Okay, so now that we have that nice and clean, we're going to do the same exact thing to our pressure plate. Okay, so now that we have that super clean, we're going to take our clutch disc itself. On the back of the clutch itself, it should say flywheel side. Now mine doesn't say that, it just simply says competition clutch, but you always want the side sticking out facing away from the flywheel. Also, make sure you don't get any grease on these pads, that would be no fun. So we're going to hold the clutch disc with our finger as we go ahead and line this up on the flywheel. And now we can go ahead and grab just our clutch alignment tool, run that through, run that into the pilot bearing. Now we want to loosely chuck a couple bolts in here to make sure nothing goes anywhere. Okay, so there's this very specific sequence that we want to do this in. We're going to go skip 1, skip 1, skip 2, and then turn up our sequence, skip 1, skip 1, skip 2. And then we'll do a spiral crisscross pattern, and as well just make sure that this is always tight and you can always just pull it out at any time. Well, don't fully pull it out yet, because the simple factor of it will fall, but make sure that you can move it in and out. But let's go ahead and start putting our Loctite on all these bolts, and then we'll start torquing them. Okay, so now it's time to put the transmission back in the car. So I have to be able to find a way to put the transmission under the car, and then onto me, and then into the slot. So, this is gonna be fun. So, as you can see, we got the transmission back in, which means we have to fill it with fluid. For the Miatas, you're going to use 75 W90 oil, and you're going to need a hose, your oil, of course, and a big wrench to be able to take off the fitting on the side. So you're going to come to the side of the transmission, and you're going to see this fill plug, which a 14mm will fit perfectly on. So we're just going to go ahead and crack this loose. Okay, so now that we have that out, we're going to take our bottle of gear oil, put a hose on the top of it, and then insert this into the plug. Now you're going to need a couple bottles of this gear oil, and what you're going to want to do is fill the transmission up with oil until it starts leaking out the side. So, finally the clutch is, and I know that this car is going to be able to handle the abuse that I'm about to throw at it. And we're going to be able to rev much, much faster because of that lightweight flywheel. So again, big thanks to Competition Clutch. If you guys are turboing your Miata, or you guys just put your Miata through the paces with drifting or driving hard in any way, shape, or form, I'll have Competition Clutch's website and all their social medias linked down below. And if you guys have learned anything from this video, or simply just enjoyed it, like, subscribe, comment, all that good stuff, it'd mean the world to me. So, I hope you guys all have a great day. See you guys all next time. Peace out.